everybody, welcome back to Start McCleary. I'm Sean, and today we are going to talk about something new. We are going to talk about drivers' injuries. We're going to talk about each driver. We're going to talk about the race was in, talk about what injuries they had, and talk about with every driver how they recovered and all that good stuff. So why don't we get started? The first driver we are going to talk about was Bill Elliott. Bill Elliott's major injury happened in the 1996 Winston Select 500 at Talladega. Bill Elliott basically it was a single car crash. He went airborne and landed driver's side first on lap 77. During the crash, Bill Elliott suffered a broken thigh bone or femur bone, which caused him to miss the next 5 races of the season. So that's all I have to say about that injury. Let's move on to another driver. The next driver I'm going to talk about is Dale Earnhardt in the same year. Was at the 1996 Die Hard 500 at once again the same track at Talladega. On lap 117, a big one happened that Dale was in the middle of. And not only did Dale Earnhardt got injured, also Sterling Marlin got injured too. During the crash, Dale Earnhardt went on top, went head on into the wall, basically flipped over through a bunch of cars, around about 200 miles per hour. And during the crash, Earnhardt suffered a broken collarbone and a broken sternum in the crash, while Sterling Marlin suffered several bruises from the hard impact. So However, both Earnhardt and Marlin were able to make it to next week's race, except Earnhardt had to be relieved by Mike Skinner at the Brickyard 400 after the first pit stop. So that's all I have to say about that injury. Let's go on to the next one. Now, Ricky Rudd had several injuries in his career, but the most major one that we have all been known for is the 1984 Busch Clash at Daytona. In that crash, Ricky Rudd went airborne. I mean, there was no roof flaps back in 1984, so basically Ricky Rudd went airborne and flipped over. Luckily, he did not hit the wall. And then after the wreck ended, he has suffered a concussion and a torn cartilage in his rib cage. And also, his eyes were swollen so badly that he taped his eyes open to be able to race in the Daytona 500, as well as he also had a jacket for his rib injury. So that's all I have to say about Ricky Rudd. There will be another Ricky Rudd one on here. So actually, I'm going to talk about that next. So let's talk about Ricky Rudd's next major injury. Another injury that Ricky Rudd was involved in was at 1998 at Martinsville, where Ricky Rudd had a winning car and actually eventually won the race. However, during that day, the temperature was really high, and also Ricky Rudd's cool box broke on lap 1. As a result, Ricky Rudd suffered severe burns and blisters throughout most of his body. And he was basically, during the victory lane interview, he was lying on the ground breathing from an oxygen mask. So that's basically all I have to say about that injury. But if he didn't originally, Hut Strickland was going to relieve him in that wreck, but however, Ricky Rudd decided just to go a full event to win the race. So that was actually pretty good for him. That's all I got to say about that one. Let's go on to another injury the driver suffered. Now, with most NASCAR fans will know about the Davey Allison injuries that he had in 1992. I'm going to talk about all 4 of them. I think he had like 4 injuries during that season. The first one was at Bristol. At Bristol, Davey Allison hit the wall, separating the cartilage around his rib cage and knocking 2 vertebrae out of place. His second and Davey Allison won the following week at North Wilkesboro. However, at Martinsville, Davey Allison got into another crash and unfortunately, with that crash, he damaged his rib cage even more. With that, but the injuries were not over. During the 1992 Winston, aka One Hot Night, Davey Allison won the race. However, he was involved in a last lap wreck when he crossed the finish line. He hit the wall very hard, and it showered bright sparks all over the track. And unfortunately, that also cracked his helmet, and he had to spend a night in the hospital due to a concussion. His most major injury that he had in the entire season was at Pocono. And at Pocono, Davey Allison dominated the race. However, when he was trying to get back into the front, Davey Allison got into the wrong lane, got spun out, and he flipped violently into the infield grass and through the and into the guardrail. He suffered a broken right forearm, a dislocated wrist, and a severe concussion, and a skull fracture, and as well as a broken wrist, and also had solid red eyes that we all remembered during that wreck. So, however, Davey Allison did not give up. He manages to come back in the next week racing, but however, he had to stop racing after a couple laps to be relieved by Bobby Hillin Jr. He was able to drive that car into a third-place finish. So, let's go on to another injury. Another injury that happened was with Darrell Waltrip in 1990 during practice at the Pepsi 400. Which Darrell Waltrip did not race. During practice, Darrell suffered multiple leg fractures, a broken arm, 9 broken ribs, and a concussion. During that race, Darrell Waltrip, I think, missed like the next few of... He actually, except for Pocono where he started the event, he missed the next few events to recover from the injuries. This would be in my opinion, this was probably, along with his 1991 Pepsi 400 crash where remember he had to get knee surgery in 2017 because of that. This would probably, I think, would have been the beginning of the end for Darrell Waltrip because he wasn't as competitive or was as good after this crash. So that's all I have to say about that injury. So let's go on to the next one. Another injury that happened that was notable was in 2002 at Kansas with Sterling Marlin. Sterling Marlin had a great year throughout the 2002 season, but however, in this race at Kansas, on lap 147, Sterling Marlin hit the backstretch wall hard. And unfortunately, in that crash, Sterling Marlin had a cracked vertebrae in his neck that forced him to miss the remaining 7 races of the season. And during that season, he was replaced by Jamie McMurray to fill in for that car until he recovered, which would have been the following season. So that's all I have to talk about then. That injury I'm going to talk about. The next injury that I'm going to talk about is actually probably the latest on this video is in 2017 with Aric Almirola at Kansas. And during this crash, Joey Logano and Danica Patrick were involved in the wreck. Logano's brake rotor exploded, collided with Patrick, and unfortunately Aric Almirola tried to avoid it but didn't. Instead he slammed very hard into Joey Logano. His car went up into the air and then it crashed down. And unfortunately in that wreck he was diagnosed with a compression fracture of his T5 vertebrae. And unfortunately he missed the next several events. And then he did not return until a couple months later at Loudon. So that's all I have to talk about that wreck. Another injury in the later years was in 2013 in California with Denny Hamlin. During the race, Denny Hamlin was battling with Joey Logano for the lead for winning the race. However, when Kyle Busch went around him to win the race, Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin pushed their cars too hard, and they connected together, which caused Denny to lose control of this car and slam into the inside wall head on, and there was no safer bearing in that wall, so Denny Hamlin took all of that impact and suffered a massive L1 compression fractured and or a collapsed vertebrae. As a result, Denny Hamlin missed the next 4 races of the season, and that would be the start of probably his worst year of his career. So, anyways, guys, that is about it. That's all I could talk about. So, anyways, guys, if you like the video, that's awesome. If you don't, I'm okay with that too. Anyways, guys, I'm Start McCleary. Thanks for watching. Peace.